Okay, great. So today I'm going to talk about impairment. So impairment losses, it decreases the ROU asset value, but it does not have any effect on the liability. It is done in the activation group level. And currently, Nakisa supports impairment in standalone and hybrid system for ASC 842, IFRS 16, and GASP 87. We have to make sure that all the postings until the impairment date are done because the impairment date will be automatically set to the next open period by default. Let's go to the application. Over here, we have an active contract with base 9,000 and the ROU start date is 1st January 2022 and end date is 31 December 2022. And I have made sure, and I want to have an impairment event in February. So I have made sure that my January entries are posted. And now I can go to the context menu from the AG level. I can go to the context menu and select impairment. So here we already have impairment date that is on 1st February 2022, which is the open with open period without any postings. And here we can select.
Pratibha, sorry to interrupt you.
Yep.
Can you please increase the zoom on your? Okay, perfect. Thank you. And because we were talking a lot about dates, and this is still an effective date, what you're saying here, but the system is going to propose you this date depending on, as Pratibha was mentioning earlier, the first open period. And impairment is one of those really just asset related events. So the fact that you posted the depreciation up to the date, up to the end of January, that's why the system is proposing the 1st of February. But similar to what we were presenting earlier, it is still the beginning of your accrual period. So the system is giving you this by default. Go ahead, Pratibha. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. So, and then in the recent code, we only have impairment loss. I'm selecting that. And let's say I need the depreciation life remaining to be 5 months. I'm selecting 5. And here we have the GPV and NPV at the beginning of the period. And we have to select the recoverable amount. Recoverable amount cannot be lower than the difference between the NPV beginning of the period and NPV at the end of the period. And it cannot be greater than NPV beginning of the period. And the impairment loss is calculated as the difference between NPV at the end of the period and the recoverable value amount. So here we have 10,899 as NPV beginning of the period, and NPV end of the period is 9,908. So the difference is 991 something. So let's say our recoverable amount is 1,000. And since I have finance lease selected for US GAAP 2, I'm selecting the same amount. And let's take a screenshot of it. So that we can compare the figures later. And I'm submitting them. Over here, a draft will be created soon. And if you go to the lease component level, we can, the AG level, we can see the impairment loss and the remaining depreciable amount as depreciation life as 5 and the loss as 9,899, which is what we seen here, 10,899 minus the recoverable value. So we can then send to assessment. And again, the effective date, it's set by default, and I can submit them. Over here, a preliminary schedule will be created, and we can check to see the impairment loss if it is correct. And we can go to the schedule or column schedule. The orange line depicts impairment event had taken place. And if you go to the right, we can see the impairment loss, 9,899. And if you go to the extreme right, you can see the NBV is the ending NBV is 800. And if you add the depreciation 200, we'll get the recoverable amount set, that is $1,000. And you can see the remaining the asset has been depreciated for 5 periods. And at the end of the 5th period, we have the NPV set to 0. Now, if we are happy with the result, we can approve them. We can confirm the classification since it's already done in the original contract. And then we can complete the remeasurement and confirm. At this point, we merged the document and the impairment event would have been affected in the original contract. So if you take the schedule here, all column, you can see the impairment event in February. One thing to note is if the activation group is classified as ASC 842 operating, then we cannot do any additional event with financial impact. For example, remeasurement, indexation event, and casualties. We can do another impairment loss. So that's it for impairment loss. Now, IFRS 16 and GASB 87, we have an option to add impairment gain. We can reverse the impairment loss that is already recorded. So let's go to the context menu. And I want to have the impairment gain in March. So I have to make sure the postings are done until then. So view posting, and I'm posting for the month of February. Also for the US GAAP. And now I'm going to have another impairment event. Again, the impairment date, it is set to the next open period without posting. So 1st March 2022. And I'm selecting impairment gain. Here we have the book value, net book value, and total impairment loss that was added before. And gain amount, this field shows the difference between the cumulative impairment loss of the previous period and the non-recoverable impairment loss. So if you go to the contract, we have the impairment 9,899 and the non-recoverable impairment loss is 899.94. And that's what is shown over here. We can reduce it if we want, but for this purpose of the training, I am keeping it as 8,999. And I'm submitting that. And if I go to the terms and condition, we have another line saying impairment gain and the same amount, 8,999. I'm sending it to assessment. Again, the effective date is set by default and submit. Here we have a preliminary schedule. I can go to the schedule and I can take the all column schedule. The third or the second orange line, it depicts the impairment gain event that we just did. And if you go to the extreme right, we see the impairment post has impairment loss has been reversed, and the amount is 9,899 minus 899.94. And once you're happy with it, you can continue with the workflow, or if you're not, you can delete the draft from here. And now we also have the option to do an accelerated depreciation via impairment. So again, we have an active contract here with the with 12 months term, and I want to do the accelerated depreciation from March. I made sure my postings are done until February. And I can then go to the AG level, do an impairment, then select impairment loss, and I can select, I can say I need the depreciation, let's say we are depreciating the asset completely within the next 5 months. So I'm selecting 5 here. And I'm copying NBV beginning of the period to the recoverable amount, making the impairment loss as 0. So now when we go similar for the US GAAP and submit. Again, a draft will be created. And if we go to the terms and condition, terms and condition, we have an impairment loss with remaining depreciation life as 5, and the impairment loss is kept as 0. And once I send to assessment, submit, we can go to the schedule, all column schedule, and we can see there is no impairment loss here. And the asset has been depreciated for 5 periods, and on the end of the 5th period, the NBV is set to 0. Do you have any question?
So maybe just another note, as you can see, there's no orange line when you simply perform just the accelerated depreciation because there is no loss that the system calculates for impairment. However, you can observe the effect of applying the accelerated depreciation. So we wanted to present you all the different type of events that you can do through impairments. And the first example that Pratibha presented, there was an impairment loss associated with the shortening of the useful life. But you can have situation where the asset continues to have the same useful life, but only apply an impairment loss. We do support situation where you can apply different amounts by standard. That's why you saw at the beginning you have different fields, so you can apply them differently. Yes, thank you. So you could have very easily have a different amount for US GAAP, and this is also because the rules for getting to the recoverable amount are somewhat different, and even in certain situations, if you want to exclude one of the standards, so for example, you want to apply the impairment loss only for IFRS, but for US GAAP, the basis for calculation doesn't trigger an impairment, then you can simply, as you saw in the latest example, set the impairment loss to zero, just to allow the system to calculate the impairment for only one standard. And we know that the impairment scenarios are complex. We wanted you to be aware of the different cases that and scenarios that you can apply. And if ever you have even more complex that we are thinking, that we are aware, reach out to us. We'll be happy to work with you for your case.
And on this note, in our next version, we have expanded the impairment function, and in 6x, we will be able to do a full impairment.
Yes.
And
So exactly. Thank you so much, Pratibha. So we are further innovating and expanding the impairment function to offer you even more case scenarios.